Beauty consultant Claire Bernal glanced up at the clock and smiled. Her long workday was nearly over. Suddenly, her colleague's expression changed abruptly to one of horror as a man crept up behind Claire, pressed a gun to the back of her head, and... Imagine working at one of the world's largest luxury department stores. As you pass through the glass doors, you enter an oasis of perfume and cosmetics, footwear, clothing, handbags, home decor, and everything else that could be sold in such a center. For one young woman, this was her dream job. Here, she was completely in her element until one summer evening when her life was cut short in an instant. This story makes you wonder what you would do if you were in Claire Bernal's shoes. This tragedy took place in Great Britain. A young woman named Claire Marie Bernal was born on July 25, 1983, in Groombridge, a village straight out of a fairy tale with sleepy green pastures and a blue ribbon of a river. Groombridge has a population of only about 1,600 people. It is just a 2-hour train ride from London, so you can make a round trip in a single day. Claire's mother, Patricia Adams, whom everyone called Tricia, worked as a chef, and the girl's father, Martin, was a finance manager who conducted business in London. Claire was the oldest of 3 children, so she was responsible for her younger brothers. When the girl turned 7, her parents' relationship cracked, and they divorced. If the divorce of her father and mother played any role in Claire's life, she never showed it, always remaining positive and radiating optimism. Due to her age, the girl did not try to choose between her mom and dad and continued to maintain close relationships with both of them. The children stayed with their mother, and some of the responsibilities for raising the younger brothers fell on the shoulders of the eldest and only daughter. Claire was a quiet, calm child. In childhood, it took her a long time to open up. With each passing year, from an inconspicuous, shy girl, she turned into a pretty young woman, kind, trusting, and frank. Every morning, Claire watched her mother put on makeup, and by the age of 12, she was already experimenting with various types of cosmetics herself. Claire attended a Catholic secondary school and worked part-time at a local store to be able to finance her love for cosmetics. She enjoyed doing makeup for her mom and her girlfriends when they came over for sleepovers. That's when she began to come out of her shell because the opportunity to make others beautiful increased her own confidence. Claire was beautiful in soul. She saw only the good in people, not wanting to see their bad qualities. Her beautiful soul was clothed in outward attractiveness, which Claire herself often did not notice. When Claire turned 18, she had transformed into a stunning young woman with long golden brown hair, flawless skin, and a beautiful smile. By that time, she was a self-taught makeup artist, but the lack of knowledge still affected her professionalism. Claire decided that to move forward in her career, she needed to increase her level of knowledge. That is why the girl went to East Kent College, where she studied cosmetology for 2 years. In the future, Bernal dreamed of working on movie sets or in the theater, doing stage makeup. She practiced this every day in the studio. After receiving a diploma as a beauty consultant and theatrical makeup artist, in 2003, Claire began sending out emails with her resume to various department stores that had cosmetic departments, hoping to gain more practice. She crossed her fingers and sent applications to the most famous brands, not really hoping to be noticed. And then, at one of the top 3 shopping centers in London called Harvey Nichols, they noticed her resume and invited her for an interview. Claire carefully checked her portfolio and meticulously flipped through her college notebooks to refresh her knowledge. The girl was very nervous because this was her dream job. Friends, over 90% of viewers watch videos without subscribing to the channel. Check if you're subscribed. If not, please be so kind as to subscribe to the channel to support me. Harvey Nichols, a British chain of department stores, sold designer collections of clothing for men and women, fashionable accessories, cosmetic products, fine wines, and luxury food items. Of course, Claire did everything to get a position at this store, and she got it. Friends and family never doubted the girl for a second, unlike herself. In the fall, Claire moved to London and started working at one of the most famous department stores. On the first floor, there were dozens of showcases with skincare products, perfumes, and cosmetics. Along the walls stood displays dedicated to specific brands. Claire and 3 other employees were responsible for one of these displays, where premium cosmetics were sold. Wealthy female customers would come to them and sit in chairs. The employee's task was to select suitable shades and recommend skincare products, as well as skillfully apply makeup so that the clients would like it and want to purchase cosmetic products of that brand. Claire was very proud of her work and always looked the part, making sure her face was flawlessly made up, her posture was straight, and her hair was carefully styled, as the department's employees were walking advertisements for the products they offered. The girl's voice was melodic, and her speech was well-spoken. She was simply made for this job. The department's employees worked in 2 shifts and spent their evenings attending parties and exploring London. Claire became very close with her colleagues. The girls were about the same age, and their interests coincided in many ways. Claire, Susan, and Natalia rented an apartment together in a safe area, about a 40-minute train ride from the shopping center. It was a green zone, similar to the countryside. Claire felt at home. She was still very close to her mother, Tricia, who now lived in Tunbridge Wells with her new partner, Peter. She also periodically communicated with her father because now both her brothers lived with him. However, Claire did not manage to see her family and friends often. Now her whole life was mainly focused on London and the shopping center where she worked. The girl liked the freedom that her profession as a beauty consultant provided her. She enjoyed hanging out with her new girlfriends, going on dates, and feeling her own attractiveness. As for long-term prospects in relationships with men, Claire was very picky. She was in no hurry to start serious romances. That was exactly the case until a handsome guy named Michael Petch appeared on the horizon. Michael got a job as a security guard at the department store in 2004, and Claire immediately took notice of him. The man had sparkling blue eyes and a kind of cute smirk. Apparently, the interested glances that the girl cast at the new security guard did not go unnoticed. At the end of January 2005, Michael approached and struck up a conversation with Claire in her beauty salon. He asked her out on a date, and she was so flattered that she immediately called her mom and excitedly told her about the handsome man. Michael Petch, or Michal, a shy but very attentive man, was originally from Slovakia. He had served in the army for some time and, after working at the American Embassy in Bratislava, came to London in 2003 on a student visa. While Michael was in the UK, Slovakia joined the European Union. This meant that he could now freely stay and work in this country. When Claire called her mother again, she said that she and Michael had already been on a date, drank coffee, had deep conversations about everything, and walked in the park. The girl shared that her new acquaintance had traveled a lot and was fun to talk to. The only thing she wasn't sure about was whether she wanted a serious relationship. This was also facilitated by the fact that Michael was 9 years older than Claire and had recently gone through a divorce. At some point, Claire felt that the man had become much more infatuated with her than she had anticipated, and since then she had felt out of place. For her, he was nothing more than a nice friend, a companion with whom it was pleasant to spend time. She simply enjoyed walking together and was not inclined towards a long-term relationship. The girl always respected her mother's opinion, so when she showed Tricia a photo of Michael, she doubted whether this person was suitable for her daughter. The woman thought that he looked too mature for her, and there was something inexplicable in his eyes, as if he had been through a lot in his life. She did not categorically express her opinion, as she saw that Claire did not have serious feelings for him. And indeed, this little fling did not last long. Just 3 weeks after their first date, on February 28th, Claire broke off the relationship. Claire believed that before getting married or starting a serious romance, she needed to interact with different men and understand for herself what attracted her to people of the opposite sex, what she was really looking for in the long run. This is a fairly conscious approach of an adult, not to rush headlong into the pool, but to find out what you really want. In April 2005, Claire, Susan, and Natalia moved to another apartment. It was a multi-story brick building, and life there was picking up steam. In July, Claire turned 22. Her mother arranged a 5-day trip to Florence, Italy for her, where they attended music festivals and took many photos. The pictures of the mother and daughter dancing, laughing, and just having a wonderful time together were supposed to be happy memories for years to come. Claire enjoyed learning about new cultures, and she even wanted to learn Italian. Tricia was so proud of her grown-up daughter and was very happy for her. That summer, Claire started dating a new guy, and this romance developed very rapidly. For the first time, the girl thought that she might want to see this person as her life partner. The relationship was gaining momentum quickly. The young couple spent a lot of time together, and they were happy. Usually, Claire worked in the morning, but on September 13th, 2005, she agreed to swap shifts with one of her roommates. It was the most ordinary Tuesday. Claire was standing at her counter across from her colleague Victoria's counter, who worked with another cosmetic brand. There were already few customers in the department, and the employees just watched as shoppers left the mall with full bags. Around 7:45 p.m., Victoria waved to Claire and pointed to the clock, as if to say that there were only 15 minutes left until closing. At this time, several customers were strolling through the cosmetics department just looking at the displays. Another colleague, Helen, was also getting ready to close the store at this time. Victoria and Claire were just standing and smiling at each other, but literally within seconds, their smiles abruptly disappeared. Before anyone could understand what was happening in the mall, complete chaos broke out. People were running, there were screams and loud noises. Several witnesses called the emergency services and reported that a shooting had occurred in the building. A shooting in the department where Claire Bernal worked was unreal. It all happened very unexpectedly. The police who arrived at the scene were told that 2 people had probably died. The patrol officers relayed the information to the station, and soon employees from the Serious Crimes Department arrived there. They were shocked that someone was able to enter the shopping center with a weapon. The victims were indeed 2 people, a man and a woman. It all happened at the cosmetics counter. The girl was lying face up, with a large red stain spreading around her on the ceramic tiles. It appeared that she had been shot in the head several times. Next to her lay a man with a bloodied face and arms outstretched to the side. There was a gun on the floor beside him, and shell casings were scattered around the body. It turned out that he had committed suicide by shooting himself in the right temple. The mall management explained to the detectives that this was Michael Petch, who had once worked as a security guard on the first floor. If anyone knew how to bring in a weapon, it was him. But why did Michael voluntarily leave this world? Was it a fit of jealousy? Was he mentally ill? How did he get access to a weapon? There were many questions, and the police had to sort it all out. The detectives learned that there had been a previous romantic relationship between the 2 deceased employees. That's when the officers found out that the second victim was Claire Bernal. The girl was not supposed to work that evening. Michael knew her schedule, as it almost never changed, and now the detectives wondered how the security guard found out that the girl would be working the evening shift. Claire's roommates told the officers that Michael was constantly hanging around the cosmetics counter. Claire had met him back in January, and they had only gone on 3 dates. The man seemed too intrusive to the girls. He demanded that Claire spend every day with him and refused to take no for an answer. According to the roommates, it was a very toxic relationship, so Claire didn't drag it out and broke up with the security guard, but he had no intention of leaving her alone. He called, sent text messages, constantly followed her, and acted as if they were still in a relationship. Michael constantly stalked the girl outside their apartment windows, so they decided to move to another area. But the harassment only intensified. He didn't want to leave Claire alone and confessed his love to her at every meeting. Claire no longer knew what to do because they had only gone on 3 dates, and she hadn't given him any reason to behave this way. The roommates explained to the police that Michael had been fired from the mall and was under investigation by the Metropolitan Police. In the summer, he stopped stalking Claire. The girls thought he was in jail and relaxed, but as it turned out, they were wrong. The investigators tracked down Michael's address and headed there. It was an apartment in an old building at the end of a street, a 40-minute drive from Claire's house, in a completely different, much more rundown area. The street was poorly lit, and the building itself was in terrible condition. It was surrounded by grass 3 feet high. All the windows were either boarded up or broken, but the front door was open. It was more like a homeless den than the residence of a decent person. In the house, the detectives found not 1, not 2, but 7 men sleeping wherever they could. None of them were armed. All the inhabitants of the strange dwelling were from Eastern Europe and spoke little English. Only one was able to somehow tell the law enforcement officers about Michael Petch. The man explained that everyone who lived in this house had a visa. They were involved in construction projects and trade. Michael was their 8th roommate, and he had always been different from the majority. While others went out drinking, Petch sat alone in his bedroom, writing something in a notebook. But in general, he was a very sensitive and kind person until the beginning of March, and then he exploded with anger again. Michael had left them at the end of April, and they had no idea where he was at the moment. The inhabitants of the abandoned house were shocked when they learned that Petch had stooped to committing a crime. While some officers were conducting the investigation, others visited Claire's father, Martin. They informed him and the girl's brothers of the tragic news. Martin's heart instantly shattered into 1,000 pieces. He had no idea that his daughter was dating anyone, and now he was angry at Tricia because she hadn't told him anything about Michael Petch. At 2:30 in the morning, the police visited Tricia's house. The woman had returned home around midnight, as she had been at a friend's birthday party. She was already asleep when there was a loud knock on the porch. Her partner Peter went to open the front door. While he was talking to law enforcement, Tricia listened to their every word. When Claire's name was mentioned, she realized that her worst nightmare had come true. The woman rushed downstairs and asked how it had happened. The police replied that the girl had been shot, and Tricia already guessed who had done it. Time seemed to slow down for the mother. An endless number of emotions and questions raced through her head. She couldn't answer any of them. Tricia spent the rest of the night in complete shock. She was too upset to talk to anyone. Grief and guilt overwhelmed the woman's heart. The next morning, on Wednesday, September 14th, detectives questioned the frightened colleagues and employees of the mall about what they had witnessed the previous evening. Everyone wanted to help. Everyone who knew Claire adored her. They couldn't believe that it had actually happened. The girls who worked with Claire told a similar story to the roommates. Claire had only gone on 3 dates with Michael before their relationship hit a dead end. The young couple had argued about something, and it was the man's fault. He came to the department to apologize and tried to win back Claire's affection, but she didn't want to have anything to do with him anymore. Nevertheless, Michael was persistent and crossed all boundaries. The girl had to turn to other mall employees for help. Michael was fired and banned from appearing in the store. Now it was time to talk to one of the last people who saw Claire alive. Victoria, who worked at the opposite counter, reported that Michael had shot Claire before she realized that she was in danger. Around 7:45 in the evening, before the end of the shift, the girls were glancing at each other. Suddenly, Victoria noticed a shadow behind Claire. It was a man, and he was sneaking up on her colleague like a spy. The girl thought that it was either a crazy customer trying to steal something or Claire's new boyfriend wanting to surprise her. At that moment, the man emerged from the shadows. In his hand was a black gun aimed at the back of Claire's head. When Victoria realized what was happening, Claire was still smiling, but then there was a loud bang, and she collapsed to the floor. Victoria stood there, unable to move. She was in complete shock. The man approached the fallen Claire and fired several more shots. Victoria saw nothing more because she ran, but she heard 2 more bangs behind her. The rest of the people in the store were also in a complete panic. Helen, the second colleague of the deceased, saw the first shot and immediately dove under the counter and covered her head. One witness thought the store was being robbed. Another thought there was some kind of accident at the mall and just ran out into the street. After the interrogations, it turned out that Michael first shot Claire in the back of the head and then 3 times in a row in the face. The 5th bullet accidentally hit the ceiling when the man tried to commit suicide, and the sixth and final one ended his life forever. The detectives found the hotel where Michael was staying at the time. In the room, they discovered a 40-page notebook where the man made his notes. He wrote in both English and Slovak. On one page, Michael wrote down Claire's new address, so the move didn't save the girls from being stalked. As it turned out, finding out the new address wasn't very difficult. Other pages of the notebook were filled with quotes about the meaning of life, about his love for Claire, and Michael's own poems. He called the girl his one and only love. The entries showed how obsessed Michael was. He and Claire had actually only gone on 3 dates, and after the first one, the man realized that this girl was destined for him by fate, and they simply had to be together. It seemed that Michael lived in some kind of fantastic world of his own. He was absolutely not interested in anything except his feelings for his chosen one. Initially, Claire and Michael lay on adjacent tables in the pathologist's laboratory, and although someone might consider it silly, one of the officers decided that it was unethical to leave the girl next to her stalker and executioner, and took Claire's gurney to another room. Claire's autopsy showed that she had been shot 4 times. The bullet to the back of the head instantly ended her life, so the 3 shots to the face were only meant to deprive her of her beauty. Michael wanted to take away everything that made the girl special. The results of Michael's autopsy showed a high level of a prohibited substance in his blood, a side effect of which is excessive aggression. It is now impossible to know whether Michael had deliberately taken this drug to give himself courage, or whether the crime was an accidental finale to an altered state of consciousness. A few days after the tragedy, the detective spoke with Tricia, the mother of the deceased girl, to find out her version of events. The woman said that after 3 weeks of dating, Michael began to act like he owned Claire. He didn't want Claire to leave the house at all or communicate with anyone, even with her roommates or mother. Michael wanted to spend every spare hour with Claire, making the girl feel uncomfortable. Claire didn't want to hurt him, so she tried to soften the breakup. In fact, she was going to end communication even earlier. But Michael had planned a trip to his home in Slovakia at the end of February, and Claire didn't want to spoil his mood before the vacation. The last straw was when the man asked the girl to meet him at the airport upon his return. Then he began to insist on staying at her apartment and not dragging his heavy suitcase across London. When Claire asked him to leave, he refused. That's when Claire decided to tell him about the breakup, after which Michael sat outside her apartment for 2 hours. But this, according to Tricia, was only the beginning of his relentless stalking. The man began to follow the girl around the cosmetics department, watching her every move, and in the evenings he followed her all the way home or just stood guard at the entrance. He texted her 50 times a day, telling her that he loved her and repeating that they were made for each other. Then the messages became more disturbing. In them, Michael threatened to commit suicide if he couldn't be with Claire. Worse, Michael dragged his colleagues into all this, who would approach the girl during the day and try to persuade her to listen to the man in love. In their eyes, Claire clearly looked like a narcissistic bitch who was playing with the feelings of an adult. She felt the need to smooth over the situation, so she agreed to talk to Michael and explain that they could only be friends. But all this only aggravated the already strained relationship. After his shift, he followed her home with a large bouquet of flowers and persisted until she accepted it. In the end, the flowers lay on the porch of Claire's house for a week as she left them outside, refusing to accept any gifts from this individual. She probably berated herself for ever agreeing to go on a date with this man. Claire still hoped that Michael would grow tired of pursuing her and leave her alone. At the mall, she tried to keep her concerns about this matter private. The young woman didn't want to lose her dream job due to an admirer's intrusive behavior. The stalking began to affect Claire's emotional and physical well-being. She couldn't sleep, stopped eating properly, became anxious and cried over trivial matters. Work issues arose due to tardiness and scattered attention. Her world was literally shrinking. In March 2005, Claire spotted Michael on the subway platform as she was heading home. She quickly jumped on the train, but the man managed to board the same car. He sat opposite her and stared intently. At the stop, Claire ran again, but he caught up and shoved her. The threat to report him to the police only angered him further. Michael menaced that he would then take Claire's life. That evening, the young woman called her mother and tearfully recounted the threats from her former admirer. Both women were frightened at that moment but didn't believe he could seriously harm her, and they were wrong. Now the mother blamed herself for not intervening, not going to the police, not demanding protection for her daughter from Michael, and not saving her life. The next day, Michael was again standing at the cosmetics department window, tapping on the glass like a guilty puppy, waving his hand and publicly embarrassing Claire. He continued his phone attacks. Claire changed her number, but it didn't help. Michael somehow discovered it and continued calling and sending messages. When she blocked him, he changed his SIM card and started all over again. As soon as Michael's text messages began to include threats towards her, Claire finally mustered the courage to approach the mall's head of security, who took the accusations seriously. Using the store's cameras, he tracked the guard's behavior and transferred him to another floor. However, Michael still came to the beauty department to spy on Claire. Eventually, he was suspended from work entirely, and Claire was persuaded to go to the police, which she did. Michael was arrested, and Claire felt responsible for this. According to her mother, the girl didn't want to cause him trouble. She just wanted him to stop. Michael was released on bail under a non-molestation order aimed in English law at stopping harassment by a former partner. This meant he couldn't contact Claire, but Michael kept reappearing. The girl was terrified of the stalking. Because he wasn't causing physical harm, only emotional abuse, the police deemed him non-threatening. Michael was examined by a doctor who found no mental health issues. Nevertheless, the officers handling his case spoke with the mall's security service and Michael himself. The man, of course, told a completely different story of his relationship with Claire. According to him, he broke up with Claire to test her feelings. After this, the girl allegedly confessed she was in love with him, but his actions had hurt her. Now she was confused and didn't believe anything. When he realized he had made a mistake trying to find out how Claire felt about him, he begged for her forgiveness and tried to win her back. At the police station, this man swore he never wanted to cause pain to his beloved. He was sorry she was so upset because of him. When Michael once again violated the restraining order, he was arrested right outside Claire's new apartment. He raised his handcuffed wrists and smiled broadly. 8 days later, Michael was released on bail. His hearing was scheduled for late August. All this time, Claire dreaded facing Michael in court, feeling like an executioner. But this didn't happen because the lawyer convinced Michael to plead guilty to stalking to potentially receive only a 6-month sentence, likely suspended. Michael was due to appear in court again on September 21, 2005, for sentencing. For several months between the arrest and trial, the persistent admirer didn't show up in Claire's sight, and the girl thought this nightmare had ended. She was relieved that she wouldn't be responsible for sending him to prison for several years, and 6 months in confinement would just show him that he had behaved incorrectly. No one expected Michael to violate his bail conditions. Detectives investigating Claire Bernal's death were able to determine the crime's motive and what preceded it, but they still didn't know how Michael managed to acquire a gun and bring the weapon into the mall. After Michael was fired from Harvey Nichols, arrested twice, and released on bail, the police lost track of him. While on bail, Michael left the country for Slovakia in April 2005. In early May, he enrolled in a month-long target shooting course in his homeland, and on June 8th, he applied for a firearm permit with the Slovak police. This included a background check and a doctor's report. The check didn't reveal any criminal charges, since Michael had not yet been convicted. After obtaining a firearms license, Michael officially purchased a compact pistol in July that was easy to conceal. Although he legally owned the weapon in Slovakia, it was prohibited in the UK. On August 11th, Michael boarded a bus back to London and hid the gun behind his back. Customs was supposed to check everyone passing through, but for some reason, Michael was never searched. He managed to smuggle the weapon and lay low until the court hearing on August 31st. All this time, he was planning an attack on Claire. Michael knew the girl's schedule and which side doors were unguarded during the day. And on September 13th, he carried out his sinister plan. Claire Bernal's funeral took place on September 26, 2005. Hundreds of people came to bid farewell to this young woman who died at the hands of a stalker. Her mother, Tricia, shared that her daughter wanted to advance in her profession, and she already had an interview scheduled for a secretary position at a PR company. Claire had begun moving her belongings to her father's house to feel safer and be closer to her new boyfriend, whom she was in love with and actually planned to marry. Her sudden passing devastated friends and relatives because none of them knew about the stalking. Claire disliked burdening others with her problems. The girl's mother, Tricia, somehow found the strength to channel her anger against Michael Petch into a successful campaign to make stalking a criminal offense. Together with families of other victims, she created an organization called Protection Against Stalking and lobbied authorities on this issue. In 2012, a new law prohibiting stalking was passed. Tricia's efforts to improve the effectiveness of the justice system earned her an honorary British Empire Award in 2021. Her work has helped many stalking victims, but unfortunately, it won't bring back the daughter whose voice she had to become to protect others. No one has the right to control another person's life. This is the end of the story. Like the video and leave your thoughts in the comments. This was Jeremy. See you soon. June 1st, 2011 was a day that changed the Waller family's life forever. A woman called her sister Cheryl and told her she was on her way to pick up her children from her ex-husband Clay and would return home later. But Jackie never returned and never called back. Concerned, Cheryl couldn't reach her, and anxious thoughts entered her mind. So around 7 p.m., she got into her car and headed to the police station. She made a stunning statement there. Cheryl stated that Clay Waller had killed her sister. It was a shocking statement to all the police officers, considering that Jackie had only called her a couple hours ago, and there was no reason yet to raise the alarm and assume she was in trouble. But it turns out Cheryl's premonition didn't fail her, and her sister was actually caught up in a creepy story. So what happened to Jackie, and what made Cheryl truly believe that her husband killed her sister even before Jackie was reported missing? Jackie was a very sweet, kind, and caring girl. When she met Clay, there was an instant liking between them. He had a speech impediment that made some people make fun of him. Clay felt awkward in that situation, but Jackie was not like the others. Not only did she not make fun of it, but she defended her lover and didn't let him get hurt. That was what Jackie was all about. She always protected the weak, fought injustice, and helped everyone. The couple began to meet. Their relationship rapidly developed. Soon Jackie and Clay got married. At that time, both were about 30 years old, and they wanted a big family. They bought a small house in Sanguine View, Missouri, and Jackie was setting up a family nest there. The woman had a successful career, which could not be said about her husband. His life was a series of failures, and he could not stay long in any place. Therefore, Jackie supported the entire family. The woman dreamed of children, but there were problems with this. Nevertheless, she made up her mind and did eco. Jackie was so happy when she found out about the pregnancy, and she was even happier when she found out that she would give birth to triplets. The family had 2 girls, Avery and Addison, and 1 boy, Maddox. It was very difficult for the woman to take care of 3 children at once, but she did not complain and continued to pull everything on herself, not counting on the help of her husband, who seemed to have no interest in the babies at all. At that point, Clay took a job with the sheriff's office to support the family, while his wife took care of the children. However, he didn't stay there for long. He was fired after a year. Only Jackie's parents and sister helped her with the children, so the woman could get some rest. Later, when Clay was fired, she began to devote time to work and support the whole family. Even after the children were born, Clay did not change his old habits and showed no interest in either his family or work. Only sometimes he went to some part-time work, but it did not bring the money that was expected of him in the family. It seems that he was satisfied with life at the expense of his wife, who worked 40 hours a week and took care of the children. Jackie's career took off, and she soon took a management position in a branch of an insurance company. But this only relaxed her husband, who now decided not to worry about money at all. Instead of appreciating his wife, Clay abused her in every possible way. He insulted her, called her worthless, and let her know that no one wanted her. He had relationships with other women, and the man behaved like a real abuser. Jackie's parents and sister were outraged by this behavior of her husband and convinced her to divorce him. However, the woman at that time was not ready for such a radical option and tried to keep the family together. Every day, all her hopes for saving the marriage were melting literally before her eyes. A few years later, they began to have problems. The couple had a difficult financial situation because the husband was not working, and Jackie's salary was not enough to cover all the expenses of their large family. The mortgage debts were growing, and soon they had their house foreclosed on. The woman decided to take advantage of the situation and go to live with her sister. The husband moved in with a friend. At that point, the children were a little older, and Jackie made the difficult but necessary decision for herself to divorce because she felt that she and her children deserved a better life. She talked to her husband about it, and initially Clay took the news calmly. However, he later changed his mind and refused to divorce. Clay began to threaten his wife. At first, the threats were indirect and detached. He just hinted at trouble. Then he moved on to direct threats to her life, claiming that if she divorced him, she would be signing a death warrant for herself and the children. All this frightened the woman, but she did not give up her decision. She just couldn't go on living like this and tried to get rid of her husband. Jackie complained about this behavior of her spouse to her family. She even kept a diary in which she recorded all his antics. Jackie also noticed that her husband was stalking her. For safety reasons, the woman and her children stayed with her sister. At that time, the children were 5 years old and did not understand what was going on. But Jackie explained to them that it was necessary. Over time, things normalized and the divorce was nearing finalization. It seemed that the husband calmed down, took their separation as a given, and stopped bothering Jackie. The couple began to move on and had already begun to build a relationship on the side. The woman allowed her husband to see the children, and they no longer had disputes. On June 1st, 2011, Clay and Jackie agreed to meet at the attorney's office to discuss the last important aspects of the divorce. On that day, the son, Maddox, was visiting his father while the other children were at Jackie's sister, Cheryl. After the meeting, Jackie was supposed to pick him up. She left the office, called her sister Cheryl on the way out, and told her that everything had gone well, and she was driving up to Clay's house to pick up her son, and then would go straight back to her sister's house. That was their last conversation. Jackie, 39, never made contact again. As time went on, the sister felt anxious and started calling Jackie, but she didn't answer. Then, the woman started calling Clay, but he didn't pick up either. Cheryl suspected that Clay had done something to her, so she texted him, "If I don't hear from Jackie in 5 minutes, I'm going to the police." The man immediately called her back and asked what was wrong. Cheryl replied to him that she was sure he knew exactly what she meant, but Clay claimed that he didn't know where Jackie was, and he would tell her to call Cheryl back when he saw her. Cheryl didn't believe the man. She took her sister's children to her parents' house and filed a police report herself. The detectives were wary of her claim that Clay was involved in her sister's disappearance, but didn't send her home to wait for 24 hours to pass. They got straight to the point and decided to contact her ex-spouse, looking for clues to her whereabouts. They called the man, and 41-year-old Clay said he had lunch with Jackie. They then met at the attorney's office, discussed some aspects of the divorce, and then drove to his house together to discuss some more issues. They chatted, and then he retreated to the store. When he returned, Jackie's car was gone, and he thought she had left. According to him, his son, Maddox, was in Illinois with his new girlfriend at the time, and the ex-wife was well aware of this and was not worried about the child. She wasn't coming to see him for her son, but just to talk to him. The man's words sounded implausible. Jackie had made it clear to her sister that she had gone to Clay's house for her son. She didn't plan to discuss anything with him, especially since she wouldn't have allowed her son to be with another woman so far away. She would definitely get angry with her ex in that situation. Cheryl just didn't believe the story. The woman convinced investigators that Clay was lying, hiding something, and things were really serious. The missing person and her car were reported missing, and a massive search for her began. After only a few hours, Jackie's car, a Honda Pilot, was found on an interstate highway with a flat tire. But it wasn't an accident. It turned out the tire had been punctured. It looked staged. The car was open and empty. There were a few bloodstains on the back seat, but no clues to the missing person's whereabouts. Everything seemed even more disturbing, as if the woman had been attacked and kidnapped. The search for Jackie centered in the area. There were many volunteers working at the site, in addition to police, rescuers, squads with dogs and relatives. They responded to requests from relatives and came from all over the area. The heat outside was unbearable, but that didn't stop people willing to help. The family announced a reward for information about Jackie's whereabouts in the amount of $3,500. Despite this, the search was unsuccessful. The police officers were looking more and more closely at the ex-husband, Clay. They arrived at his house to talk to him again. The man told the same story when the investigators asked to see his house and car. Then he flatly refused and immediately hired himself a lawyer who began to assert his rights. 4 days after her disappearance, Clay left his wife a voicemail message in a crying voice. "Hi, honey. It's Sunday. You went missing on Wednesday. Please, if you got this message, call me. I don't know where you are and I miss you very much. Please call me." Detectives were later able to obtain a search warrant and return to his home for an inspection. Upon inspection of the vehicle, blood-like stains were found. Forensics collected blood samples and sent them for testing, but it showed that it was fish blood. It turned out that earlier Clay had deliberately coated the car with this blood and filmed it on video, setting up such a peculiar test for forensic experts. Upon inspection of the house, it was striking that there was no carpet on the floor. A piece of the flooring had simply been cut out, leaving an obvious mark. Also, tiny drops of blood were found on the walls of the hallway. In the basement, there were traces of furniture rearrangement. Something was clearly going on in the house. Forensics looked under the floorboards and found a bloody carpet. Blood samples from the house along with the carpet were sent to the laboratory for examination. Detectives have located the missing woman's last movements. At 11 a.m., she was spotted at a drugstore with her ex-husband. The couple appeared normal. 2 hours later, the woman was seen at an ATM withdrawing money. Jackie did not appear on CCTV again after that, and Clay was seen afterwards. A few hours later, the man and his son and new girlfriend headed to a toy store. Later, they arrived at the car wash in their pickup truck with a boat that had a suspicious trash can in it. Clay was already in different clothes and had thoroughly washed the car and boat. Clouds were gathering over Clay, and he became the prime suspect. Investigators released photos of the ex-husband's pickup truck and boat with a request for eyewitnesses who saw them. A young couple who saw Clay near Devil's Island on the Mississippi River responded to the request. Detectives were able to confirm this information through Clay's cell phone billing, so cops put out a search effort in the area. Over and over they searched there, but found nothing. It was a huge area, but they felt that the solution to the mystery of the woman's disappearance was somewhere close by. By this time, the forensic results were ready, which showed that the drops of blood in Clay's house belonged to the missing Jackie. The police believed the woman was already dead. Detectives called the man in for questioning and persuaded him to confess to the murder, but he would not agree. Clay claimed it was old bloodstains from a domestic trauma in the kitchen. Without a body, investigators couldn't arrest the suspect and charge him. They released the man, but continued to monitor him and investigate. Clay, who had once worked as a deputy sheriff, was well aware that the police were watching him, and he played cat and mouse with them. He'd go to deserted vacant lots to confuse the investigation. While the entire neighborhood stood by and participated in the search for the missing mother of 3, Clay continued to bully and taunt them. He would drive past the search party or Jackie's family, insult them, give them the middle finger, and shout after them that they were wasting their time and wouldn't find anything. His defiant behavior raised more and more suspicions and questions. Meanwhile, the missing woman's sister, Cheryl, fought in court for custody of the triplets. She feared the children would go to a father who was a danger. His erratic behavior backfired on him, and Cheryl got custody. This enraged him, and the man began threatening his ex-wife's sister with violence, including writing to her about it on social media. The woman recorded these threats and contacted police. Detectives seized the opportunity and arrested Clay nearly 5 months after Jackie's disappearance. He was charged with threats to life, which he accepted. But the man was no longer as defiant as he used to be. He claimed he wrote it out of anger and despair at losing custody of his beloved children, but didn't plan anything bad against Cheryl. Clay was sure that he was the victim in this situation. While investigating this incident with his sister, police found out that he had other charges pending against him for stealing $50,000 from a previous employer, as well as stalking a man. Detectives began pressing the former co-worker in hopes that he would still confess to killing his ex-wife and lead them to the body, but it was to no avail. Clay continued to deny all charges regarding Jackie's disappearance. Instead of confessing to the crime, he began to confidently claim that he knew who was behind his ex-wife's death. In his opinion, it was her new lover named Harry. But the detectives explained that they had checked this version, and Harry had an ironclad alibi that allowed them to cross him off the list of suspects. Everything pointed only to Clay, but he kept denying it anyway. He ended up going to prison for 5 years for threatening Cheryl. While the police locked him up in jail, they continued to investigate Jackie's disappearance. The search for the missing woman continued on Devil's Island, but never yielded any results. Eventually, about 2 years after Jackie's disappearance, the cops, after gathering a lot of circumstantial evidence, video camera footage, blood in his house and more, decided to charge Clay with his ex-wife's murder, even without her body. It was a risky and desperate move, because if they lost, the prosecutor's office would not be able to charge him a second time. But the prosecutor was determined. After consulting with his accomplices, Clay concluded that it would be best for them to make a deal with the prosecution to reduce the sentence. To do so, the defendant offered to plead guilty to the murder and provide the location of the body. Jackie's family agreed to this deal because it was important to give her a decent burial. Clay led police officers to his ex-wife's body. It was in a secluded spot on a remote sandbar on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River. At first, he couldn't remember exactly which tree he had buried her under, but then he admitted that he had placed a bag of fertilizer on top of her body. One of the policemen, who was an active gardener, explained that large quantities of fertilizer kill trees. They looked around and found 3 dead trees that were of interest to them. They excavated there, and under one of the trees they did find Jackie's body, wearing the same clothes she had last been seen in. The woman was identified from dental records as Jackie Wooler. Finally, Jackie's loved ones recognized that she was definitely dead and found her body. Then they were able to commit her to the ground. The woman's funeral was held on her parents' golden wedding day. Cheryl told the children that their mom was gone and she had been killed by their father. This event was a great shock to the children because they lost both their mother and father at once. The children hated Clay from that moment on and refused to communicate with him. Mal, as part of the deal, Clay had to officially confess to killing his ex-wife and give details. The man explained that the first thoughts of murder began to come into his head a year before the bloody event, when Jackie announced to him about the breakup. But he pushed the bad thoughts away from him. After all, Jackie was the mother of his children. However, he couldn't allow the woman to take his children away from him. He warned Jackie that it would end badly for her, but she didn't listen, and that was her fault. The man confessed that the night before the murder, he had traveled to that secluded spot on Devil's Island to dig a grave for Jackie there. Clay at that moment thought of taking her life. According to him, their divorce was generally going smoothly. That day, after the visit to the lawyer, they talked, and she suggested that they have sex for the last time. At that point, they headed to his home. Once home, they talked in the kitchen. Meanwhile, the man looked in the refrigerator for a snack. Clay accidentally raised his head and bumped her head, causing Jackie's nose to bleed. This made her angry. She went out into the hallway where she stained the walls with blood and started yelling at him that he would never see his children. That's when the man couldn't take it anymore and lashed out at her. He hit her once in the face with his hand and then strangled her. After that, he took the body out in the same dumpster and buried it in a pre-dug grave. After that, he thoroughly washed the car, cleaned the house, took a shower, changed his clothes, and, as if nothing had happened, went to meet his new girlfriend and son at the toy store. At the same time, the man claimed that everything happened on impulse, on emotion, and he did not intend to kill Jackie. This contradicted his earlier statement that he had dug the grave the day before. However, if Clay did not intend to kill the woman, why did he dig the grave beforehand? It seemed like a premeditated murder. The medical examiner determined that the deceased had multiple skull fractures, indicating blunt force rather than a simple fist beating. No one believed his story. Clay, who never repented for killing his ex-wife, was already jubilant, happy with only 20 years in prison for second-degree murder and the possibility of getting out early. The prosecutor, however, had another card up his sleeve. Clay's testimony about the grave buried him. The hole was dug by him in another state, Illinois, and the murder itself took place in Missouri. These features fell under the federal law against domestic violence facts across state lines, and he violated it. It allowed him to add an additional 35 years to his sentence. Clay Waller will become eligible for parole after serving 85% of his 55-year sentence. As it turned out, Clay did not even know about such a law and did not anticipate the consequences of his confession. But the defendant's atrocities did not end there. Clay added cynicism to the story and wrote a book detailing Jackie's murder to capitalize on the tragedy. The sister of the deceased said Cheryl and her husband continue to raise her children as relatives. In this, they are helped by their elderly parents. The children have grown up and remember their mom as the best person in the world, who has forever remained in their hearts. They are still mad at their dad and miss their mom. On July 5, 2018, residents of the Manrique district in the city of Medellin, Colombia, were searching for a 16-year-old girl who had disappeared 7 days earlier. She had said she was going to her best friend's birthday party, but never returned home. Her mother prayed to God for the police to find her, even if she were dead. She could no longer bear the uncertainty of not knowing where her daughter was. On that day, as if by miracle, they called her and informed her family of the whereabouts of the missing girl. Officers, along with her relatives, then headed to that location. Sometime before that, the stepfather of the girl had noticed something behind the house. There were very large tracks, as if someone had been dragged on the ground. He followed the tracks and found a place where a swarm of flies circled. The man tried to get closer, but the horrible smell caught him off guard. Nevertheless, he decided to lift the rocks to see what was underneath. What he saw took his breath away. There was a completely disfigured head. Melanie Stacy Amaya was born on February 22, 2002, in the municipality of San Rafael, Colombia. Her parents, William Amaya and Maria Leon, were overjoyed at her arrival. Despite being very young, they had long planned for the birth of their daughter and finally realized their desire. After some time, the family grew with the addition of another child, Natalie. The sisters got along very well with each other and constantly played together from childhood. Melanie was characterized by her zest for life and cheerfulness, and her smile was her main distinguishing feature. Additionally, she was very playful. Melanie often asked her mother for cosmetics to paint her dolls. Although her parents didn't have a lot of money, they always tried to provide her with everything she needed. In school, Melanie was one of the best students and consistently received excellent grades. Over the years, she developed a very strong character. She was proud and always wanted to be right in everything. However, this did not prevent her from maintaining excellent relations with her mother. If they argued, they always reconciled quickly. When Melanie became a teenager, her parents separated but maintained a good relationship. Soon after, Maria met Ruben Morales, and they became a couple. After a while, they decided to move in together and settled in the Manrique district in the city of Medellin. Maria's daughters had a great relationship with their stepfather. They considered him their second father. Ruben, in turn, respected their bond with William and always reminded them that he was there to help with their upbringing, but didn't want them to stop seeing their father. By the age of 16, Melanie was already a very beautiful girl who loved dressing up and having fun. She had many friends who highly valued her. Around the same time, she discovered her passion for electronic music and decided that she wanted to become a DJ. Since her family supported her in everything, they began saving money to buy a mixer, confident that whatever she set her mind to, she would succeed. However, Melanie was never able to fulfill her dream. On Thursday, June 28, 2018, Melanie was applying makeup for a party celebrating the birthday of her best friend, Isaac. Despite already having celebrated his birthday a week earlier, they were planning to attend another party scheduled to take place in a nightclub located on Carrera 45th Street in an area known for its nightlife. After finishing getting ready, she told her mother that she was leaving. Her mother asked her to take care of herself and not to come back too late. Melanie then got into her Uber and headed to the party. However, she never made it to the destination. When Isaac arrived at the nightclub, he immediately noticed that she was not there. Loud techno music filled the air, and the place was crowded. He searched for Melanie everywhere but couldn't find her. He started texting her, but she didn't respond. The young man thought that maybe she was with her friend and decided to wait until the next day. Maria woke up at 7 a.m. and noticed that her daughter hadn't returned to her room. Everything was as she left it the night before when she was getting ready for the club. Concerned, she started calling her, but the phone was unreachable. The woman thought maybe the battery had died and Melanie was at a friend's place, but it was still strange that she hadn't tried to call her back. Maria then decided to call Isaac. He informed her that Melanie hadn't come to the party and that she might be with a friend. After that, she reached out to all of her daughter's acquaintances, but no one knew where she was. Finally, she managed to talk to friends who revealed that Melanie did approach the club's door, but didn't go inside. They thought she might have gone to another party. Completely desperate, Maria called her ex-husband and shared the horrifying news. He tried to reassure her, saying that it was still very early and maybe Melanie was sleeping at someone else's house. However, noon came and Melanie still hadn't appeared. Her parents attempted to file a report at the police station, but since it was a weekend, the report wasn't accepted, and they were advised to wait until Monday. Trying to maintain composure, the parents thought that perhaps she had gone to some village to celebrate the long weekend. Maybe she didn't have signal on her mobile phone, and that's why she wasn't in touch. But deep down, they knew it wasn't true. They felt that something terrible had happened. Maria, Ruben, and William began the search for Melanie. They went everywhere they thought she could be, in the homes of acquaintances, parks, streets, and the nightclubs she frequently visited. After the initial attempt, they decided to plaster the city with posters containing a detailed description of the girl. The posters featured a photo Melanie took on the night of her disappearance. She was dressed in a short blouse, light blue jeans, and white sneakers. The image was accompanied by a description of her physical characteristics: slim, short, with black hair and brown eyes. She had several tattoos, such as a rose on her forearm, a moon on her back, wings, and two distinctive ones: a fish on her right leg covering a motorcycle exhaust burn, and a tattoo below her collarbone with the inscription, "Crazy Life." They handed out flyers to passers-by and police officers on the streets, conveying their desperation and urging immediate official search efforts. The news spread quickly, and all social media platforms were filled with photos of Melanie. The weekend passed in the worst possible way. Maria couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about her daughter. Finally, Monday morning arrived, and she went to the police station to file a missing person report. The search was classified as urgent since the girl was a minor. The police checked hospitals and morgues to determine if there was any information about someone matching Melanie's name or physical description, but they found no traces of her. The girl's parents clung to the hope of finding her alive. However, as the days passed, her absence became increasingly worrisome until finally, the first lead emerged. A witness came to the police station to provide testimony. He recounted that on the night of June 28th, he saw Melanie near a football field, not far from the Manrique neighborhood. He noticed that the young girl was dirty and covered in mud, as if she had fallen. She was accompanied by a young man in baggy clothes, a cap, and large sneakers. Throughout the time she was on the field, she didn't speak, stood in a corner, and seemed completely lost. While these testimonies contributed to the investigation, the situation remained complex. The description of the guy who was with Melanie was quite generic, and many of her friends dressed similarly. However, Maria remembered one person, Miguel Angel Naranjo Pareja, her daughter's ex-boyfriend. The young man was 18 years old, and their relationship had ended somewhat unsuccessfully 3 months ago. Maria asked her younger daughter to contact Miguel. He claimed to know nothing about Melanie's whereabouts, mentioning that he hadn't seen her in several weeks. After this conversation, Miguel became extremely distressed and stated that he would die if something happened to her because he still loved her deeply. However, a few days later, new testimonies emerged that contradicted Miguel's statements. Several people claimed to have seen them together near the club that evening. They also mentioned that he was very drunk. Following these statements, officers began considering Miguel as the prime suspect in the girl's disappearance. They obtained a search warrant for his home but found no traces of Melanie. Once again, the police were back to square one, with no clue about the whereabouts of the young woman. On July 5th of the same year, Maria woke up in complete distress. She couldn't believe that her daughter was still missing. She prayed to God to bring her back, whether alive or dead, as she could no longer bear the uncertainty. Her prayers were answered, and on that same day, Maria received a phone call. However, what she was told did not bode well. The number was unknown, but without hesitation, the woman answered on the other end. A voice came through, instructing her to stop searching for her daughter because she was already in another world and buried on a hill called El Calvario. Without further questions, the person asked Maria not to report him to the police, as he hadn't spoken earlier out of fear. After the call ended, she hurried to the police station, and along with her husband and 2 officers, went to the specified location. She also warned all her acquaintances to help in the search. The area was vast, with many entrances and overgrown with bushes. To reach the hill, they had to overcome numerous steep stairs and pass by squatter houses. Therefore, it was decided to split into several groups to cover the territory more quickly. Reuben went to a section overgrown with bushes behind one of the houses. He noticed large tracks on the ground as if someone had been dragged. Following the path, he came across a place where a swarm of flies circled, and a strong odor lingered. He took a stick and started moving stones on the ground. Under one of them, Reuben saw something horrifying, a human head. He immediately called the police who were conducting the search nearby. Initially, they thought it might not be a human, as this area was known for discarding animals. They continued moving stones and saw blood. Finally, they managed to get a good look at the face. It was severely disfigured, but it was evident that it was a human head. Maria couldn't stop crying. Until the last moment, she refused to believe it was her daughter, but when they uncovered the body, all doubts were dispelled. Despite the body being in a state of advanced decomposition, the tattoo on the girl's chest was visible. She was completely undressed. Her mouth was open and filled with dirt. All her teeth were knocked out, and one eye had popped out. In addition, there was something very strange. The person who buried her had covered her with calcium oxide. The body was exhumed by a team of forensic experts and taken to the Institute of Forensic Medicine and Criminology. A few hours later, the experts confirmed that it was none other than Melanie Stacy Amaya. Although traces of all kinds of violence were found on her body, the cause of death was mechanical asphyxia. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, it was impossible to determine whether she had been sexually assaulted. The only thing they could confirm was that she had been severely beaten. Melanie's relatives were devastated. The hope of finding her alive was gone, but they could still seek justice for the heinous crime committed against her. The media reported the discovery, and all eyes turned to Reuben. Some considered the fact that he found the body alone as making him a potential suspect. However, the residents of Manrique had a different opinion. They knew Melanie had no enemies, but understood who might wish her harm. Everyone was aware that her relationship with Miguel ended on bad terms, and he was known to be a rather cruel young man. Meanwhile, the young man continued sending messages to Melanie's relatives, expressing his deep sorrow for her loss and stating that he would do everything possible to find her. However, no one believed him anymore. A furious mob of neighbors gathered at his home, intending to lynch him, taking advantage of the situation. The police took him to the police station, assuring him that they would ensure his safety. However, the real purpose was to interrogate him. He provided statements quickly, asserting his innocence and expressing great confidence in his words. As there was no evidence against him, he had to be released. Almost simultaneously, charges against Reuben were dropped. There was no evidence pointing to his involvement in the murder. Still considering Miguel as the main suspect, investigators began to find out what kind of relationship he had with Melanie. According to people close to the girl, the couple met in 2016 when she was 14 and he was 17. Melanie organized a party with her best friends and hired a DJ, which turned out to be Miguel. She was enamored with him, and the next week they started chatting. After a while, a relationship developed between them and the couple went everywhere together, including outings with friends. Miguel was liked by everyone the girl knew. They noticed that he treated her with respect and that he loved her very much. Over time, the young man began to spend more and more time at Melanie's house, and he became an integral part of the family. Maria claimed that Miguel had problems with his mother, and the young man told her that she often beat him and sometimes left him hungry. In the first months of living together, everything was wonderful. They were closer than ever, but over time, the relationship between the teenagers began to deteriorate. Miguel and Melanie constantly argued, and the boy was most bothered by the fact that the girl liked to dress provocatively. She was so upset by their quarrels that she decided to drop out of school and started engaging in something she had never done before, using psychoactive substances. It took Maria some time to realize this and talk to her daughter. She said she only did it a few times, always in the company of Miguel. This caused the young man to lose the trust and respect of the family, and since then, the situation has only worsened. The arguments became brutal and escalated into physical violence. Miguel constantly abused Melanie, leaving marks on her neck and arms. One day, he beat her so severely that the entire room was covered in blood. Maria tried to help her daughter, but Melanie asked her not to interfere in their relationship. She begged her to allow them to continue living together. Her friends were also concerned. They noticed her spirit fading, and they saw her crying every day. After 2 years of being together, on May 23, 2018, the young couple had their final and extremely cruel argument. Melanie decided to break up with Miguel for good and kicked him out of her house. However, the young man didn't accept it. He began to stalk her and follow her everywhere. Then Ruben decided to file a report with the prosecutor's office stating that his stepdaughter was in danger and requested a restraining order. Unfortunately, this measure was never implemented. Over the next few months, Miguel continued to search for Melanie. He swore to her that if she gave him another chance, he would do things differently. However, she never agreed. And without any police assistance, the young woman tried to go about her life as usual until a terrible event occurred on June 28th. Receiving more evidence about the relationship between the young individuals, the police investigated Miguel's criminal history. They found that despite his young age, the guy already had encounters with the police. Records indicated that he had assaulted his mother, siblings, and sisters. Additionally, they obtained a statement filed by Ruben several months ago and testimonies from one of Melanie's acquaintances. This young man stated that Miguel had told him that if he found out she was dating someone else, he would kill her. But that wasn't the most shocking revelation. The person who called Maria decided to disclose his identity. He was a relative of the young man, living with him in the house located in the Granasol area, very close to where Melanie's body was found. He recounted that on June 29th, around midnight, he saw Miguel coming into the house with a shovel in hand, and his shoes were dirty. A few minutes later, the young man started a bonfire and began burning clothes and cosmetics. Afterward, he took a long shower. Gathering all the evidence, on July 10th of the same year, officers obtained an arrest warrant for Miguel. The young man voluntarily appeared at the police station where he was charged with murder under aggravating circumstances. However, he denied the charges and, with a strange smile on his face, pleaded not guilty. After 6 months of prolonged legal proceedings, Miguel decided to enter into a plea deal. He agreed to the charges that identified him as the perpetrator in exchange for a reduced sentence. Right after that, he recounted the final hours of the young woman's life. On June 28, 2018, Miguel saw Melanie in front of the nightclub where Isaac's birthday was supposed to be celebrated. He approached her to talk, but quickly noticed that she was exchanging messages with another guy, triggering uncontrollable jealousy in him. He couldn't believe she already had another suitor, and an argument ensued, escalating into a brutal fight. Miguel struck her forcefully, knocking her to the ground. A few hours later, they went to a football field, where the altercation continued. At some point, he grabbed her by the neck and strangled her until she died. When he went to hide the body, he sprinkled lime on her, having seen in a movie that people used it to eliminate the smell of decay. Miguel then returned home, burned the girl's clothes and belongings. At the end of his testimony, the young man expressed satisfaction that he had acted under the influence of prohibited substances. His account was somewhat vague, and Miguel refused to specify where he buried Melanie and how exactly he concealed the body. Officers speculated that after leading her to the football field, he convinced her to go and talk alone near the spot where he later buried her. They were only certain of two things. Miguel was guilty of the girl's murder, and his motive for the crime was jealousy and obsession. Psychological tests indicated that he was aggressive, possessive, and volatile. However, they also established that at the time of the crime, he was sane, so he had to face trial. On Friday, January 18, 2019, nearly 7 months after the girl's murder, the first hearing took place. Miguel was found guilty of the charge of murdering the woman under aggravating circumstances and was sentenced to 34 years and 8 months of imprisonment. After the jury announced the verdict, he apologized to Melanie's relatives and the community. Although the girl's family was satisfied, they all stated that they would never forgive him.